The battlefield was quiet, too quiet. Smoke drifted slowly across the broken ground, covering the land in a gray blanket. The air smelled of metal, fire, and ash, as if the world itself had burned. Shattered weapons lay across the soil, half buried in the dirt. Alien machines stood frozen in silence, their glowing lights now dark. To anyone looking from above, the war seemed over. The aliens had won, or at least that was what they believed. The alien generals sat inside their command ships drinking to victory. They told themselves that the humans were finished, their armies broken, their cities gone. They laughed and spoke of returning home, of celebrating on their distant worlds. They thought no human remained alive on this ruined battlefield. But they were wrong, very wrong. Beneath the smoking ruins of an old farmhouse, a single man lay hidden. His name was Eli, a farmer, not a soldier. His hands were dirty, his clothes torn, and his body weak from hunger. But his eyes still held fire, a small light of defiance that refused to die. In his grip, he held an old wrench, rusted from years of fixing tractors and water pumps. It was the only tool he had left, and somehow, in that moment, it felt like the only weapon he needed. Eli had watched the world change. He had seen the skies fill with ships larger than mountains. He had seen human armies fall one after another until hope itself seemed broken. He had buried friends, neighbors, and family under the soil he once used for planting crops, and now he sat alone, the last survivor of his village. The aliens thought they had crushed every spark of resistance, but they had not counted on him. He pressed his ear to the ground, listening. Far away, he could hear the rumble of alien patrols, machines rolling like thunder. The sound made his heart pound, but it also made him think. Machines meant gears, valves, pipes, and circuits. Machines meant weaknesses, and machines meant something he could fix or break, he whispered to himself, the words steady, though his body shook. I am no soldier, but I know machines. The wrench in his hand felt heavy, but also strong, like it carried the weight of his entire past. It reminded him of the days when he fixed broken harvesters under the hot sun, of the nights when he repaired engines by lantern light. Back then, he never thought those skills would matter in war, but now they might be the only thing left that could change anything. The ruins around him groaned as the wind pushed through collapsed beams and broken walls. Eli climbed out slowly, careful not to make a sound. The sky above was dark with clouds. Though faint flashes of alien energy weapons still burned on the horizon, he moved across the dirt, crouching low. Every step was dangerous, every breath could be his last. If the aliens spotted him, he knew there would be no mercy, and then he saw it. A massive alien crawler stood not far away, its legs twisted, its core engines silent. The machine looked dead, smoke rising from a hole torn into its side. Eli's eyes narrowed, his farmer's mind already at work. The crawler was not dead, not fully. It was broken, yes. But machines could always be fixed, and if it could be fixed, maybe it could be turned against its masters. He crouched in the dirt, heart racing. He remembered the day the crawler had stormed through his fields. It had burned his crops, crushed his home, and carried away people he loved. He remembered the sound of its weapons, like thunder tearing through the earth, and now it sat before him, wounded, waiting. It almost felt like justice, like fate had placed this machine here for him. For a farmer with nothing left but a wrench, Eli moved closer. Crawling on his stomach through mud and ash, he could see alien markings occurring. The machine, glowing faintly like embers, wires sparked inside the torn metal, leaking energy like blood. He placed his hand on the cold steel, closing his eyes. He could feel the rhythm of the machine, the way a farmer feels the soil in his hands. Yes, it could be repaired. And if it could be repaired, it could be controlled. The night grew colder, the wind sharper. In the distance, alien voices carried through the air, their strange language echoing across the ruins. Eli pulled himself back into the shadows, clutching his wrench tighter. Fear struck him, but so did determination. He was one man, just a farmer, yet the war was not over. Not while he could still breathe, not while he could still fight. The battlefield was silent, but within that silence, something new was born. Not an army, not a weapon, but a single human farmer with a wrench, And in that silence, the seeds of rebellion were planted. The aliens thought the war was won, but the war had only just begun. The night stretched long over the battlefield. The stars above were hidden by smoke, and the ground glowed faintly with the dying fire of machines. Eli sat in the ruins staring at the broken alien crawler, his wrench cold in his hand. He knew the risk. He knew that one wrong sound could bring a patrol upon him. But something inside whispered that this was not only survival, this was destiny. He moved closer to the crawler, his eyes sharp like a hunter's. Every bolt, every pipe, every crack told him a story. He touched the edge of a broken panel. Sparks flickered beneath his fingers. The machine breathed like a wounded animal, not dead, not alive, waiting. And in that moment, Eli saw more than a weapon. He saw a chance. He remembered the life he once lived, the mornings when he fixed tractors before sunrise, the days when he repaired harvesters that fed his village. Machines had always trusted him, always responded to his touch. He was not a fighter, but he was a fixer. And maybe that was what this war needed most. With slow movements, he pulled himself inside, to the machine's belly. The air smelled of oil and burning wires. Alien markings covered the walls, glowing faint green. Strange pipes hummed with energy he did not understand. But beneath all the alien design, Eli noticed something familiar. A pump that worked like a water engine, a valve that looked like the one he once used for irrigation. The aliens had built advanced machines, but the bones of them were not so different from the tools of Earth. His hands trembled as he raised the wrench. He tightened one valve, then loosened another. He wiped sweat from his forehead, every sound echoing like thunder in the silence. A shadow passed outside, heavy footsteps of an alien patrol. Eli froze, breath caught in his chest. The patrol moved on, unaware of the human hiding in the heart of their war machine. He continued his work, heart pounding. He remembered how his father once told him, "Every machine has a rhythm. Listen to it, and it will tell you what it needs." So he listened. The crawler's heartbeat was faint, broken, but not gone. He tapped a pipe, tightened a bolt, rerouted a connection. Hours passed like seconds, and then with a sudden spark, the crawler shuddered, its core lighting up with a weak glow. Eli pulled back, eyes wide. The machine was alive again, breathing under his touch. The ground shook lightly as its legs twitched. The alien crawler that once destroyed his home now bent to his will. He whispered softly, almost in disbelief, "I can control you." The night grew colder, the silence heavier. But within the shadows, Eli began to understand something powerful. The aliens thought humans were weak because they lacked advanced weapons, but they had overlooked the simple truth. Humans understood machines, not through design manuals or codes, but through years of sweat and work. Where an alien saw only parts, a farmer saw a living system, and that was his secret. Outside, a patrol passed again, their glowing armor moving like ghosts in the smoke. One alien stopped, sniffing the air. Eli held his breath, gripping the wrench tightly. The alien peered. The sky was heavy with clouds, pressing down on the ruined battlefield. Ash drifted in the wind like snow, and the ground still smoked with the scars of war. Eli sat in the belly of the alien crawler, his hands trembling but steady. Hours of work had passed, every bolt tightened, every wire adjusted, every valve touched by his wrench. The silence around him was broken only by the faint hum of energy building inside the machine. He leaned closer to the core, listening. It was weak, fragile, but it was breathing again. He pressed a hand to the side of the machine, and the steel vibrated softly under his palm. The crawler was waking up. Eli whispered to himself, "Come on, just a little more." He tightened one last connection. Sparks danced across the panels. A low growl rumbled through the crawler's frame. The floor beneath him shook, dust falling from the roof of the ruined farmhouse. Lights flickered along the alien markings, glowing brighter with each second. Then, with a sharp jolt, the crawler stood. The ground trembled as its massive legs moved slightly, like a giant stretching after a long sleep. Eli stumbled back, gripping his wrench tightly, his breath caught in his throat. It was alive. The very machine that had once destroyed his farm now obeyed his hands, but the sound was not quiet. Far away, alien patrols lifted their heads, their sharp ears catching the mechanical roar. The glow of their armor appeared on the horizon, growing closer. Eli's heart raced. He had no weapon but the machine itself, and now it was time to see if his gamble had worked. He climbed into the crawler's control space, wires sparking around him. He pulled at levers, twisted knobs, and the machine responded with groans and roars. The legs shifted, crushing debris beneath their weight. The earth shook with each movement. The alien patrol broke into a run, their strange voices echoing. Across the battlefield, they were coming straight for him. Eli gritted his teeth, sweat dripping down his forehead. He remembered the days of plowing heavy soil with broken tractors, the way the machines had always resisted, always demanded strength and patience. This was no different. It was still a machine, and he was still a farmer, one command at a time, one adjustment at a time. He forced the crawler forward. The alien patrol arrived, weapons glowing in the dark. They shouted, raising their rifles, ready to destroy the crawler once and for all. Eli pulled the lever hard, the crawler roared, and one of its legs slammed into the ground. A shockwave tore through the soil, knocking the patrol off balance. Before they could recover, the crawler's heavy limbs swung wide, crushing two of them instantly. The others screamed, firing their weapons in panic. Energy bolts lit up the night, slamming into the crawler's armor. Sparks flew, metal burned, but the machine kept moving. Eli's eyes widened, his heart pounding with both terror and awe. He had turned the weapon of his enemy into his own shield. The aliens scrambled, shouting to each other, fear in their voices. Eli pushed the machine forward, its massive frame stomping across the ruins. Every step was thunder, every movement a reminder that humans were not finished. One alien broke away, running toward the base with desperate speed. Eli knew what that meant. They would report what they had seen. They would spread the story that a human had taken control of their machines. He felt fear, but also a strange sense of power. The myth had already begun. The patrol scattered, fleeing into the smoke. The battlefield grew silent again, the crawler standing tall in the ruins, its core glowing bright. Eli leaned back against the steel, his chest heaving. He had survived, he had fought back, and he had won his first battle. But he also knew this was only the beginning. The aliens would not stay silent. They would come with greater numbers, heavier machines, and stronger weapons. But he was ready. He was only one man, a farmer with a wrench. But now he had a weapon that no alien could expect. Not a gun, not a bomb, but knowledge, skill, and the will to fight. He looked out across the smoking land, his eyes sharp. Somewhere in the distance, survivors might still be hiding. People who thought hope was gone. If they saw what he had done, if they saw this machine standing alive again, maybe they would believe. Maybe they would rise. Eli placed his hand on the crawler's frame, whispering softly, "You're mine now." The machine hummed, lights pulsing like a heartbeat. The battlefield was no longer silent. It carried the sound of resistance, the sound of a machine awakened by a farmer's hands. And far beyond the hills, the aliens trembled. For the first time, they feared not the human armies, but a single human farmer with a wrench. The ghost of the battlefield had been born, and his war was only beginning. The battlefield was not as silent as before. The night carried whispers, drifting from one ruin to another. Hidden human survivors had seen the lights of the alien crawler moving where no human should be. They had heard the thunder of its legs and the screams of the patrol that never returned. Some believed it was a trick of the aliens, others believed it was a ghost. But among the ruins, the whispers grew louder. They said a human farmer had risen, holding nothing but a wrench, and he had turned the machines against their masters. Eli walked through the wreckage, his boots sinking in ash. The crawler followed him slowly, its massive frame leaving deep marks in the ground. He kept his head low, not for shame, but to avoid the alien scouts that circled the skies. He had survived the first fight, but he knew more would come. The aliens would not ignore the rumor of a human ghost. They would hunt him harder than ever. But he was not alone anymore. One evening, as smoke of burning metal filled the air, a figure appeared from the shadows, a young woman, her clothes torn, her face covered in dirt. She carried nothing but a piece of broken metal for defense. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Are you the farmer with the wrench?" Eli looked at her, his eyes tired but steady. He did not call himself a hero. He did not call himself a fighter. He only nodded, and the woman's eyes filled with tears. "My family. They said hope was gone," she whispered. "But now, they believe again." Soon others followed, creeping out of tunnels and ruined homes. Old men, children, wounded soldiers, mothers with empty eyes. They all gathered near the crawler, staring at it with awe. It was more than a machine now. It was a symbol, proof that humans could still fight back. They looked to Eli not as a farmer, not even as a soldier, but as a leader. At first, Eli resisted. "I'm no commander," he told them, his voice rough. "I only know machines." But the survivors did not care. To them, knowledge was a weapon stronger than guns. To them, the wrench in his hand was as powerful as any blade. Eli began teaching them. He showed them how to loosen weak bolts on alien weapons, how to jam energy rifles with simple scraps of metal, how to cut into the power lines of alien crawlers using nothing but tools from the ruins. The survivors listened, their eyes wide, their hearts burning with new courage. They had been broken, but now they were learning to fight again. The aliens noticed the change. Patrols vanished in the night, ambushed by hands once too afraid to resist. Machines shut down suddenly, their engines failing where Eli had taught others to strike. Fear spread among the invaders. Whispers reached even their commanders. "The humans have found a way to control our machines," they muttered. "They are ghosts with tools, turning our weapons against us." One evening, as Eli repaired the crawler under the pale moon, a boy approached him. The child's voice was soft but filled with awe. "My father says you can fix anything," the boy said. "Can you fix us too?" Eli's hands froze on the wrench. He had no answer, for he knew he was only a man, but he looked at the faces around him, faces filled with hope again. And he realized something. He was not just fixing machines, he was fixing people. He was repairing their will to fight, their will to live. The night grew darker, thunder rolled across the sky. Alien ships moved in greater numbers, their lights cutting through the clouds. They were coming for him, but Eli no longer stood alone. A crowd of survivors stood with him, ready with scraps, tools, and courage. He felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders, heavier than any machine, but he did not falter. He raised the wrench into the air, its metal catching the firelight. "We are not finished," he said, his voice strong. "We are not ghosts, we are humans, and we will fight." The survivors answered with a cry, their voices shaking the night. The sound carried far, echoing through the ruins, and for the first time since the war began, the battlefield did not sound like defeat, it sounded like rebellion. The crawler hummed beside them, glowing faintly as if it too heard their cry. Eli placed his hand on its steel surface, whispering, "You are not just a machine, you are hope." The wind carried the words into the dark, and somewhere in the alien command ships, the generals shivered, for they realized the whispers were true. A human farmer had risen, and his legend was spreading faster than their fear could contain. The whispers had spread too far. The aliens could no longer ignore them. Across the ruined lands, patrols whispered of a human farmer who turned machines against their masters. Commanders dismissed it at first, calling it fear and foolish talk. But then patrols began to vanish, machines failed in the middle of battle, and human survivors struck with new courage. The story of the Far. Mir with the wrench was no longer rumor, it was a threat. Inside their towering command ships, alien generals gave their orders. "Find him, break him, erase his name," they commanded. And soon the sky itself answered. Dark shapes descended through the clouds, larger than any patrol. Dozens of crawlers marched in formation, their steel legs shaking the ground. Flying ships hovered above, their lights cutting through smoke like blades. The counterattack had begun. Eli stood among the survivors, the air thick with the sound of thunder. The ground trembled as the alien army closed in. Children clung to their mothers, men gripped broken pipes and sharpened scraps. The crawler he had fixed stood behind him, glowing faintly. It looked small compared to the army that approached, but in the eyes of the survivors, it was still a giant. They looked at Eli, waiting for his command, his hands tightened around the wrench, his mind racing. He had taught them how to break patrols, how to disable weapons, how to survive. But this was not a patrol, this was an army. For a moment, doubt hit him like a blade. He was only a farmer, only one man. How could he lead them against this storm? The earth shook violently as the first alien machines stopped at the edge of the ruins. Their weapons glowed, humming with deadly power. A voice carried across the battlefield, booming through alien speakers. "Human ghost," the commander said in a cruel tone. You will die tonight, and your story will die with you. The survivors shook with fear, some falling to their knees, but Eli stepped forward, raising his wrench high, his voice cut through the fear like fire through darkness. They think we are ghosts, he shouted, but we are still here, we are still human, and we will fight. The crawler behind him roared to life, its core glowing bright. The sound shook the ruins, and the survivors raised their voices in a cry. The aliens hesitated for a breath, their confidence cracking for the first time. Then the battle began. Energy bolts rained down, blasting holes into the earth. Explosions lit up the ruins, fire consuming broken walls. Survivors scattered, some hiding, some rushing forward with makeshift weapons. Eli climbed into the crawler, his heart hammering in his chest. He grabbed the controls, pulling the levers hard. The crawler moved with thunder, slamming its leg into the ground and sending a shockwave through the enemy line. Aliens stumbled, but more pressed forward. The sky filled with fire, ships raining destruction on everything below. Eli grit his teeth, steering the crawler through the chaos. He swung its heavy limbs, crushing patrols beneath its weight. The survivors fought with everything they had, using Eli's teachings. They jammed rifles, cut wires, and brought down smaller machines with nothing but courage. But the aliens came in endless waves. A blast slammed into the crawler's side, shaking it violently. Eli was thrown against the steel walls, pain exploding across his body. He forced himself back up, gripping the wrench with bloody hands. Smoke filled the cabin, alarms blaring in alien language. The machine was breaking, but so was he. Outside, survivors screamed, their lines faltering. The alien commander raised his weapon, pointing directly at them. It would be the end, the final strike to erase them. Eli's vision blurred, but in that haze, he saw it. The enemy's largest war engine moving at the center of their formation. Its glowing heart pulsed with power, and in that glow, he recognized something, a valve, a flaw, a weakness. Just like the crawler he had fixed, his heart pounded with new fire. The answer was there, staring at him. If he could reach that engine, if he could break it, the entire alien force might fall, he whispered through broken breaths. One more machine, one more chance. He pushed the crawler forward, forcing its broken frame through. Fire and smoke, survivors saw him and cried out, rallying behind his desperate charge. The aliens fired in fury, but the machine pressed on. Every step shook the ground. Every spark reminded Eli of his father's words. Every machine has a rhythm. Listen to it, and you will know its heart. The battlefield burned, screams and thunder filling the night. The aliens pressed harder, but Eli pressed harder still, for he knew the war would not be decided by soldiers or by generals. It would be decided by a farmer with a wrench. And tonight, that wrench was humanity's last hope. The battlefield burned like a furnace. Flames climbed into the night sky, black smoke hiding the stars. The earth shook under the march of alien machines, their weapons firing without pause. Survivors ran between the ruins, fighting with scraps and courage, but they were breaking. The alien commander stood tall, certain the end was near. And at the center of their formation, the war engine moved. It was larger than any machine Eli had ever seen, its body a mountain of steel, its core glowing like a burning star. Eli's crawler limped through the fire, its armor cracked, its limbs shaking. Sparks rained down from broken wires. Alarms screamed in alien tongue. But still, Eli pushed it forward, his eyes fixed on the glowing heart of the war engine. He knew what he had seen, that valve, that flaw, the same design weakness he had found in the smaller crawler. If he could reach it, if he could strike it, the engine could be destroyed. The tide could turn. Survivors cried out as they saw him charge. Some screamed for him to fall back. Others shouted his name. To them, he was no longer just a farmer, no longer just a man with a wrench. He was hope itself, moving through fire with the courage of 1,000 souls. The alien war engine roared, its weapons unleashing waves of energy. Buildings crumbled, the HFY split open, and fire swallowed everything in its path. Eli gripped the crawler's controls, steering with all his strength. Every step forward felt like lifting a mountain, but step by step, the crawler closed the distance. A blast struck its side, tearing through its armor. Eli was thrown hard against the steel wall, blood filling his mouth. His body screamed in pain, but his hands refused to let go. He wiped the blood from his lips and forced the machine onward. "This ends tonight," he whispered, his voice raw. The crawler's last limb smashed into the ground, launching it upward. It slammed against the war engine, steel crashing against steel. The battlefield shook as the two giants collided. Survivors froze, aliens screamed, the world itself seemed to hold its breath. Eli knew the crawler would not last. Its frame was breaking, its heart was failing. But he had not come to win with the crawler, he had come to get close enough. He pulled the emergency lever, the crawler's hatch flying open. Heat and smoke hit his face, flames licking at his skin. He leapt from the machine, clutching the wrench tight in his hand. The war engine loomed above him, a tower of death. Its weapons turned toward him, glowing with energy. But Eli ran, his boots pounding the broken ground. Every step was fire, every breath was pain. But he ran. He climbed the side of the engine, gripping broken panels, pulling himself higher. Aliens fired at him, beams of light flashing past, but he did not stop. He climbed like a farmer scaling a barn, like a man chasing the sun. At last, he reached the glowing valve, the weakness at the core. It pulsed with power, humming like a beast's heart. Eli raised the wrench high, his muscles shaking. He thought of his farm, of the fields he had lost, of the faces of the dead. He thought of the boy who had asked him to fix not just machines, but people. He thought of every survivor who still believed, and with a cry that shook the night, he brought the wrench down. The valve cracked. Sparks exploded outward. The war engine shuddered, its lights flickering wildly. Eli struck again, the wrench tearing deeper. The core screamed, a sound not of metal, but of something alive breaking apart. One final strike, all his strength poured into it, and the valve snapped. The war engine roared like a dying god. Its glow turned white, brighter than the sun. Aliens screamed, running in terror. Survivors fell to the ground, shielding their eyes. The machine trembled, its massive body shaking apart, and then it exploded. The blast lit the battlefield, a wave of fire tearing through the alien army. Machines collapsed like toys. Soldiers were thrown into the air. The ground split open, fire rushing through the cracks. When the light faded, the war engine was gone. Only broken steel and fire remained. Eli lay on the ground, his body broken, his wrench still in his hand. He could barely breathe, but he forced his eyes open. Around him, survivors were rising, staring in disbelief. The alien army was scattering, their greatest weapon destroyed, and in their retreat, the whispers became shouts. They cannot kill us. They cannot stop us. They thought the war was over, but we are still here. Eli raised the wrench weakly, the metal blackened with fire. His voice was faint, but strong enough for those nearest to hear. "It was never about soldiers," he said. "It was about us, about what we can fix, what we can build, what we refuse to lose." The survivors lifted their voices in a roar that shook the night. The aliens fled. The tide had turned, and in the ruins, one farmer with a wrench had saved the world. The battlefield was quiet again, but this silence was different. It was not the silence of defeat, but the silence after a storm. The alien war engine lay in ruins, its broken pieces glowing faintly in the ashes. The survivors stood among the wreckage, their faces covered in soot, their bodies bruised and scarred, but in their eyes burned something the aliens had tried to erase: hope. Eli lay on the ground near the twisted steel, his body weak, his breath shallow. The wrench was still in his hand, blackened by fire, yet unbroken. Survivors rushed to him, their voices filled with fear. "He's alive," one cried. "He's still breathing." They carried him away from the flames, laying him gently among the ruins. Children gathered close, their small hands gripping his arm. To them, he was no longer just a man. He was the reason they still lived. The alien army was gone, fleeing into the night. They had left behind their weapons, their machines, their pride. For the first time in years, the survivors looked at the sky and did not feel fear. They felt victory, and they knew it had come not from a soldier, not from a general, but from a farmer with a wrench. Eli's eyes fluttered open, the firelight reflecting in them. He saw the faces of the survivors, saw their tears, their smiles, their belief. A weak smile touched his lips. "I told you," he whispered, his voice faint but steady. "Machines can be fixed, and so can people." The survivors wept, but their tears were not only of sorrow, they were tears of gratitude, tears of pride. In that moment, Eli became more than a man. He became a symbol, a story that would never die. Word spread quickly, carried by every survivor who escaped the battlefield, from village to village, From city to hidden city, the tale grew. They spoke of the farmer who rose from the ashes, the man who turned alien machines against their masters, the human who brought down the war engine with nothing but courage and a wrench. The aliens called him a ghost, but to humans, he was a legend. As weeks passed, more survivors gathered. They built camps among the ruins, planting seeds again in the soil. Where once there was only fear, now there was unity, and above their camps they painted a symbol, a wrench crossed with fire. It became the Mayi. Arc of Resistance, the banner of humanity's return. The aliens tried again to crush them, but the tide had changed. Every machine they brought was met with human hands that knew how to break it. Every patrol was met with people who remembered Eli's lessons. The whispers had become war cries, and across the galaxy the invaders trembled, for they had not just lost a battle, they had awakened a force they could not control. Eli did not rise again to lead the battles. His body was too broken, his wounds too deep, but he did not need to. His presence alone was enough. Survivors came to him, seeking his words, his wisdom, his quiet strength. And though his voice was faint, it carried weight greater than any weapon. One evening a child asked him, "Are you a hero?" Eli smiled, shaking his head slowly. "No," he whispered. "I am a farmer. I only fixed what was broken." But the survivors knew better. Heroes were not born in uniforms or with weapons. Heroes were born in fields, in farms, in ordinary hands that refused to let go of hope. When Eli's time finally came, the survivors gathered around him. They placed his wrench in the soil, standing tall like a monument. They promised that his story would never be forgotten, that his name would echo across stars and generations. And so it did. Years later, when the war was over, when humans rebuilt their cities and their skies were free again, children still spoke of him, not as a commander, not as a warrior, but as the farmer who saved the world. Songs were sung of his courage, tales were told by fireside, and even on alien worlds his name was spoken with fear. The farmer with the wrench, the ghost of the battlefield, the man who refused to die. The galaxy had thought the war was finished long before he rose, but Eli proved that a single human, armed only with will and a simple tool, could change everything. His story was it just about machines. It was about people. It was about how hope, once planted, could grow stronger than steel, and so his legacy lived on. Not in weapons, not in crowns, but in every human heart that whispered, "We are not finished, we are still here."